Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 to 12. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising, and we have come to pay him homage."
When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born.
They told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it has been written by the prophet, 'And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel.'"
Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word so that I may also go and pay him homage."
When they had heard the king, they set out, and there, ahead of them, went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was.
When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage.
Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh.
And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road.
So I collect some interesting words from time to time, run across various things that other people don't in some very obscure readings. And there are some of these words that are pretty interesting and pretty fun and actually pretty useful. And there's a word that shows up about this time of year that I think is really kind of neat. And that word is liminal. Liminal, Liminal. It's sort of an odd word that doesn't get used very often, but it is an interesting word. The word liminal comes from the Latin limen, which is the Latin word for the English word threshold. So the limen, or the threshold, is the piece of wood at the bottom of a door. Now, liminal space, physically speaking, is the space that is above that threshold piece of wood and inside of the door frame. It's a space that's kind of a barrier between the inside and the outside. It's the space between one room and the next room. Sometimes it's a physical space that we move through very quickly, but sometimes it's a space where if you stand in the doorway, well, you stand in that liminal space and you can look into both of the rooms at the same time. Now, obviously, over time, this phrase, liminal space, has sort of been expanded and made into a metaphorical concept. The idea of liminal space is now used to refer to those times in our lives that are moments of transition. Times where we are either leaving something or something has finished, but the new thing has not yet quite begun. Liminal spaces are important times where we often get the chance to reflect on where we have been, but also where we are going. This weekend, I think, is one of those liminal spaces. And it's a liminal space on a number of different levels. On one hand, we're at the end of a calendar year, which is often a time where people naturally reflect on the past year, and we also look forward to the coming year. At the same time, we find ourselves doing this practice of year-end reviews and also New Year's resolutions. That's a liminal thing, where we look backwards and forwards at the same time. This particular weekend is also very much a liminal space for a lot of people in our community, particularly anybody who has kids in the school system, or any of the amazing teachers who are part of this congregation or beyond. Unfortunately, today is a day where Christmas break is basically over. But for a few hours yet, the school year has not yet quite begun again. It's this weird liminal space that carries a mix of emotions for a lot of people. From a church calendar perspective, a Christian holiday perspective, this weekend also marks something of an important transitional time. Today is Epiphany Sunday. More specifically, Monday, the 6th of January, is actually the day of Epiphany, which is a day that marks the end of the Christmas season. You know those 12 days of Christmas that you hear about in the song? Well, those are not actually before Christmas. That's Advent. The 12 days of Christmas start on Christmas Day, and they go for 12 days and end on Epiphany. Epiphany, in a Christian sense, is the celebration of the wise men coming to visit Jesus and his family. It's also a transition point between the Christmas season and the next season of the church year. It's the last Sunday where we have the Advent wreath up and going and we sing Christmas carols. It's also a Sunday where we often begin to look forward to the coming year and what God has in store for us. Now, this year, on Epiphany Sunday, I would like us to focus our attention on one small part of the story, because I think it takes us into an interesting liminal space that we can reflect on, that allows us to reflect on our own lives as well. Although I will be clear here that I'm taking a very small slice of this story to reflect on, and there is a lot more to the story. If you were here last week, you heard that really the story gets quite complicated after our scripture for today. And if you're interested, it's worth going back and listening to that sermon. In any case, that's all to say that there is more going on than what we're going to talk about today. But today, I would like us all to place ourselves, well, in an interesting position. I would like us to think about something that has to do with the wise men themselves, particularly the part of the story where they are going home, where they're leaving the visit with the Holy Family. I need you today to get out your imaginations. Some of you have imaginations that are a little more used than others, but dust off whatever you have and get your brain into this mindset. I want you to think a little bit. Close your eyes if you need to. Imagine yourself as one of the wise men. Think about that for a little bit. Think about what it felt like to be one of the wise men coming to visit Jesus. Imagine, for starters, that you are coming from your home country where you hold a significant position of authority and power. What's more, you are someone who has studied religious texts, not only of your own religion, but of all sorts of other religions. And you're a person who looks to the stars to try and figure out divine clues and messages from the universe. Now, one day, you were looking at the stars and you're looking at all of these different religious texts, and you figure out that there is a new star that has appeared. It's a strange star. And you figure out through your study of the stars that this means there is probably a new leader that has been born in a foreign country. The stars have shown you that this neighboring country and neighboring religion even now has a new political and religious leader that has been born. Now, this is a big deal. So you organize a delegation from your people and you set off on a long journey to go and welcome this new leader. You're trying to build up some goodwill between your neighboring countries, so the proper thing to do is to go and pay respect to this new leader. And so you head out on a long journey to a foreign land. And when you get there, you go to the most obvious place that you should go. See, normally when a new leader like this is born, well, they're born to a powerful family who is already in a position of leadership. So naturally, what you do is you head straight for the palace of the local king, a king named Herod. You head there and announce why you are there, to pay homage to the new king that has just been born. However, instead of being greeted with joy and celebration, when you tell Herod and everybody else this, well, the king seems a little bit confused that you have just showed up. He clearly has not just had a son to take the throne. And he does not exactly seem to be expecting a new heir to have just been born. In fact, you notice pretty quickly that instead of joy and celebration, everybody around you seems to be reacting with fear. They're scared and nervous. Somewhat strangely, the king pulls you off to the side and tells you to go and find the child so that he can come and worship him too. And so you set out from Jerusalem to this small town outside of Jerusalem called Bethlehem. Now, finding an unknown baby is a little bit of a trick in a small town. But fortunately for you, there is this star that had appeared in the night sky, which is what had led you to this place in the first place. And this star has continued to lead you, and now it has actually stopped right over this particular town. And so you get out your instruments and you figure out exactly where it has stopped, and you find this house where this child is supposed to be. It's a small house. It's simple, but well-loved. His parents are quite poor, although that doesn't necessarily stand out because everybody in town is very poor. And you go up to the door, feeling a little bit strange in your full, beautiful clothing, dressed as a dignitary, bringing an international greeting. Nevertheless, you knock on the door, it's opened, and you head inside. And there, playing on the ground, is a small child. While all of this seems a little bit strange, you also have the sense that this child is the child you've been looking for. And so you kneel down in front of him and you present him with these gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh, extravagant gifts meant for a king. That night, while you're sleeping, you were warned by a divine messenger that you should not go back to Herod, but rather you leave quickly out of town and go a different way than you came. You get your entire entourage together and you start traveling back home. Imagine yourself in that moment as you are heading back home on this long journey to your country. What are you thinking about on that journey home? More specifically, what is it that you are taking with you back to your home country? See, often we think about the gifts that the wise men bring to Jesus and what those mean. But maybe it's worth thinking about, what did the wise men take back with them from their experience with Jesus? After this strange encounter, what are you as a wise man thinking about differently than you did before? What new wisdom have you gained? When you go back home, what are you going to tell the people about what you have experienced? The question maybe is not just what did the wise men bring to Jesus as a gift, but now that they have had this encounter with Jesus, what will they take back home with them on the journey? The question of what the wise men took back with them after their encounter with Jesus is one that I think is worth pondering. In part because it should cause us to ask the same question of ourselves. Particularly on this weekend, in this liminal space between the end of one year and the beginning of another, between the end of a Christmas season and the next season to come. What is it that each one of us are going to carry forward with us in this new year? See, over the course of December and during Advent and the Christmas season that followed, we asked a question during our series. And that question is, what are you waiting for? And sometimes we ask this in different ways. Sometimes we ask it of God. In a difficult and painful world, God, what are you waiting for in order to intervene? Other Sundays we ask this question of ourselves. When we hear that calling from God, that direction from God to go live as kingdom people, well, what are we waiting for? Why don't we get working? All along the way, however, this question has been leading us ultimately to an encounter with Jesus, with the Son of God, with Emmanuel, which means God with us. Just like the wise men, we have gone through the Christmas season this year and have had this encounter with the presence of Christ. And just like the wise men, we now leave that time and we move back into the ordinary time of the year. And just like the wise men, as we journey back into the ordinary time, we find ourselves carrying new things with us for the journey ahead. As we head into this new year, I want to invite all of us to reflect for yourselves. about what we are going to carry with us into the new year? What is it that you want to carry with you as you head into the journey that will be this year? Maybe let me give you an image to think about as we think about what it is we want to take with us. At our house, we have a morning routine. Katie works for the hospital, and which means she's often gone by the time the boys and I get up. We have a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, which means that it's just the three. Thanks for watching this video from the First Church of the Brethren in Wichita, Kansas. If you'd like to watch another video, click the link on the right. Thanks for liking, commenting, and subscribing on this video. And we'd love to have you join us on Sundays at 9:30 for Sunday school and 10:45 for worship. Everyone is welcome, and you're invited.